The Ghost Army That Never Was. The year was 512 BC, and the autumn winds carried whispers of war across the valleys of ancient Wu. In a modest command tent lit by flickering oil lamps, a man sat alone, his weathered fingers tracing lines across a map of silk. Sun Tzu was not a large man, nor did he possess the booming voice that commanders often use to rally their troops. What set him apart was something far more dangerous, a mind that could see battles that had not yet been fought and win wars that would never need to be waged. Outside, 10,000 soldiers of the Wu army waited in nervous silence. They had been told they would march against the kingdom of Chu at dawn, a force 3 times their size. The men sharpened their weapons and whispered prayers to their ancestors, knowing that many of them would not return. But Sun Tzu sat motionless, studying not the map of terrain, but the invisible map of human fear. He understood something that most generals of his era did not, that every battle was won or lost in the space between a man's ears before a single sword was drawn. The greatest weapon was not bronze or iron, but the carefully planted seed of doubt. And tonight he was about to sow an entire harvest. 3 hours before midnight, Sun Tzu summoned a young officer named Wei. The boy was barely 20, with hands still soft from scholarly pursuits rather than warfare. He stood before his general with wide eyes, clearly terrified of whatever mission awaited him. "Tell me, Wei," Sun Tzu said without looking up from his map, "what do you know of the Chu commander, General Huang?" Wei swallowed hard. "He is said to be ruthless, master, a veteran of 40 campaigns. He has never lost a battle." "Wrong." Sun Tzu's correction was gentle but firm. "He has never lost a battle where he felt confident of victory. There's a difference. General Huang is not ruthless, he is cautious. His victories come from overwhelming force and careful preparation. He never engages unless he believes the odds favor him decisively." The young officer nodded, not fully understanding where this was leading. Sun Tzu finally looked up, and his eyes held a glimmer that might have been amusement. "Tonight, you will become a deserter." Wei's face went pale. Desertion was punishable by death, often preceded by the execution of one's entire family. "Master, You will be captured by Chu scouts within an hour of leaving our camp. You will be tortured, but not severely. You will break quickly, as a frightened young man would, and you will tell them exactly what I am about to tell you." Over the next 30 minutes, Sun Tzu wove an elaborate fiction. Wei was to reveal that the Wu army was not 10,000 strong, but 30,000, that reinforcements had arrived from 3 allied kingdoms, that Sun Tzu had acquired detailed maps of Chu's defenses from a traitor within their ranks, that the Wu army possessed a new type of crossbow that could pierce armor at twice the normal range. Most importantly, Wei was to mention, as if letting it slip accidentally under duress, that Sun Tzu planned to attack not from the expected eastern approach, but from the west, through a mountain pass that Chu had left lightly defended. "But master," Wei said, his voice shaking, "none of this is true. We have no reinforcements, no new weapons, and the western pass is a 3-day march through treacherous terrain. We could never move our army through there without being detected." "Precisely. Now go, and Wei, be convincing. Your fear must be real because it will make every lie you tell more believable." Wei left the tent, and Sun Tzu returned to his map. He made a small mark where he knew Wei would be captured, a grain storage facility that Chu scouts regularly patrolled. He made another mark indicating where General Huang's main force was currently positioned. Then he began to calculate how long it would take for Wei's information to reach Huang, how long Huang would deliberate, and where Huang would ultimately move his troops. Sun Tzu was not guessing. He had studied General Huang for 3 years, collecting reports of every battle the man had fought, every decision he had made. He knew that Huang's caution was born from a defeat early in his career, a defeat that had cost him half his men. He knew that Huang trusted intelligence gathered from captured enemy soldiers more than reports from his own scouts, because captured men could be broken while scouts might be deceived by planted evidence. He knew that Huang would never ignore a threat to his western flank, especially not from a force he believed outnumbered his own.
The trap was not of steel or rope. It was made of fear and false assumptions, and it was already closing. By morning, Wei had been captured exactly where Sun Tzu predicted. The Chu scouts found him hiding in a grain storehouse, his hands trembling, his story spilling out between sobs. They brought him before their intelligence officers, who applied just enough pressure to make him talk. Every word Wei spoke confirmed what Chu military doctrine would consider reliable intelligence, a frightened deserter revealing secrets he believed would save his life. The information reached Huang by midday. He sat in his command pavilion surrounded by senior officers as the report was read aloud. When it finished, silence filled the space. 30,000, one officer muttered. Our scouts reported only 10,000. Reinforcements could have arrived under cover of darkness, said another. Huang studied the map before him, his jaw tight. Everything about the report troubled him, yet everything about it also made sense. Sun Tzu was known as a cunning strategist. An attack through the mountain pass would be exactly the kind of unconventional approach the man might attempt. And if Wu truly had superior numbers and new weapons, a direct confrontation would be costly even in victory. "What do you recommend, General?" his second-in-command asked. Huang did not answer immediately. He was thinking about the Western Pass, about how vulnerable it would leave his main supply lines if Wu's army managed to get through. He was thinking about the new crossbows, about how his armor might not protect his men. He was thinking about Sun Tzu's reputation, about the rumors that the man could predict his enemy's moves with supernatural accuracy. He was thinking about everything except the one question that mattered. Could this information be a deception? "We march west," he finally declared, "immediately. We'll fortify the pass and force them into a bottleneck if they try to come through. Send word to the eastern garrison to maintain defensive positions but commit no forces to offensive action." His officers hurried to execute the orders, and within hours the bulk of the Chu army was on the move. 30,000 soldiers marching away from the eastern approach, where they had been carefully positioned, leaving behind only a skeleton force to guard what they now believed was a feint. Sun Tzu received word of Huang's movement from his own scouts by evening. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before calling his officers together. "The Chu army has moved west," he announced. "They expect us to attack through the mountain pass with overwhelming force. Instead, we will do something far simpler. We will march east against their weakened defenses, and we will do it tonight." The officers exchanged glances. This was the moment of truth when theory became blood and steel. "But, Master," one veteran commander said carefully, "even with their reduced numbers, the eastern garrison still matches our strength, and they hold fortified positions." Sun Tzu nodded. "True, which is why we will not actually attack them either." He unrolled a new map, this one showing the Chu supply routes. "While General Huang marches his army west, burning through supplies at an accelerated rate, we will position ourselves here." He pointed to a junction where 3 major roads met, and simply wait. "We'll send raiding parties to harass their supply convoys. Nothing major, just enough to create anxiety. We'll light campfires to suggest a large force, move our troops frequently to create dust clouds that imply constant reinforcement. We'll let captured scouts escape with reports of our massive army gathering for an attack."
He paused, letting the strategy sink in. General Huang is now in the worst possible position. His main force is out of position, marching toward a threat that doesn't exist. His eastern defenses are weakened but expecting an attack that won't come. His supply lines are extended and vulnerable. And every day that passes, his soldiers grow more tired, more hungry, and more convinced that they're facing a superior enemy. We're going to let him defeat himself. The next 2 weeks unfolded exactly as Sun Tzu had orchestrated. The Wu army moved into position and began their campaign of psychological warfare. Small raids struck at supply convoys, never causing serious damage, but creating a constant state of alert. Campfires bloomed across the hills each night, suggesting an army far larger than actually existed. Merchants were paid to spread rumors in nearby villages about massive Wu troop movements. Captured Chu scouts were treated well, shown deliberately inflated portions of the Wu camp, and then allowed to escape. Meanwhile, General Huang sat in his fortified position at the Western Pass, waiting for an attack that never came. Each day his scouts brought new reports. The Wu army was gathering in the east. No, the south. No, they had split into 3 forces. They numbered 40,000. No, 50,000. They had the new crossbows. They had cavalry from the northern kingdoms. They had siege equipment. The reports contradicted each other, which somehow made them more believable. Of course the information was confused. Sun Tzu would be working to obscure his true intentions. What Huang didn't realize was that the confusion was the intention. Sun Tzu wasn't hiding his plans. He was manufacturing chaos, creating a situation where Huang had too much information, none of it reliable, all of it designed to reinforce one central belief: that the Chu forces were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and facing an enemy that was always one step ahead. After 10 days, Huang's supply officers began reporting shortages. The extended supply lines were proving difficult to maintain, especially with the constant raids. Morale was dropping as soldiers spent their days fortifying a pass that saw no action. Some officers began to question whether the intelligence about the Western attack had been accurate. Huang silenced them, but he himself was beginning to doubt. On the 15th day, Sun Tzu made his final move. He sent a messenger under flag of truce requesting a parley. The message was simple. Sun Tzu wished to discuss terms of Chu's surrender. When Huang received the message, he nearly had the messenger executed. The audacity of it! Sun Tzu with his inferior force demanding surrender from Chu? It was an insult. But it was also, Huang realized with growing dread, exactly what a commander with overwhelming superiority would do. Sun Tzu wasn't asking for surrender because he was desperate. He was offering it as a mercy to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Huang called a council of his senior officers. For hours they debated. Some argued for an immediate attack to call Sun Tzu's bluff. Others pointed out that they still didn't know the true size or position of the Wu forces, and attacking blindly could be disastrous. A few, speaking in hushed tones, suggested that perhaps accepting terms might be the wisest course. "We haven't even fought a battle," Huang said, his voice tight with frustration. "How can we surrender without fighting?" "The battle is already lost, General," his second-in-command said quietly. "We're out of position, low on supplies, and facing an enemy we can't locate or count. Even if we win a direct confrontation, the cost will be catastrophic. And if we lose—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Huang stared at the maps before him, at the markers representing his forces, at the blank spaces where Sun Tzu's army might or might not be. He thought about his reputation, about 40 victories that might be erased by one catastrophic defeat. He thought about the soldiers under his command, good men who would die if he made the wrong choice. He thought about Sun Tzu, sitting somewhere in the darkness, waiting with what might be an unstoppable force, or might be nothing more than 10,000 men and an elaborate lie. "Send word to Sun Tzu," Huang finally said, each word seeming to cost him something. "We will discuss terms." The parley took place in a neutral village 3 days later. Sun Tzu arrived with a small escort, dressed in simple robes that made him look more like a scholar than a military commander. General Huang came with full ceremonial armor and an honor guard of 50 soldiers. They met in a grain warehouse across a simple wooden table. Huang studied his opponent carefully, trying to reconcile the unremarkable man before him with the legendary strategist who had apparently orchestrated his defeat. "You asked to discuss terms," Huang said stiffly. "What are your demands?" Sun Tzu poured tea for both of them with careful precision. "I demand nothing, General Huang. I am here to offer you a choice." "A choice?" "You can withdraw your forces back to your home territory. In exchange, I will not pursue. No battle, no bloodshed, no victor or vanquished. Simply 2 armies returning to their homes." Huang's eyes narrowed. "And the alternative?" "We fight." Sun Tzu met his gaze steadily. "My army will attack your positions. You will defend. Men will die. Eventually, one of us will win. Perhaps you, perhaps me. The outcome is uncertain, as all battles are." "Your army," Huang said carefully. "How many men do you actually command?" Sun Tzu smiled slightly.
Does it matter? You've already decided the answer to that question. You've seen the campfires, heard the reports, calculated the odds. The number I give you now won't change what you believe. It will only make you wonder if I'm lying.
Huang felt something cold settle in his stomach. He was right, of course. If Sun Tzu claimed 30,000, Huang would assume he was understating his strength. If he claimed 10,000, Huang would assume it was a trick. The truth had become irrelevant, buried under layers of deception and counter-deception. "Why offer terms?" Huang asked. "If your position is so strong, why not just attack?" "Because the greatest victory," Sun Tzu said, "is the one that costs nothing. Every soldier who dies is a loss, regardless of which side he fought for. Every battle won is also resources depleted, families broken, land devastated. I could defeat you, General Huang, but why would I want to?" He leaned forward slightly. "You are a good commander. Cautious, thorough, experienced. Under different circumstances, we might have been allies rather than enemies. This war between Wu and Shu serves neither of our peoples. It exists because kings and politicians have decided it should exist, not because our soldiers have any quarrel with each other." Huang said nothing, but something in his expression shifted. "So, I offer you this. Return to your territory. Tell your king that you found Wu's defenses too strong to assault without unacceptable losses. I will tell my king that Shu's army withdrew rather than risk a battle we might not win. Both of us will have preserved our forces, our reputations, and the lives of our men. Both of our kingdoms will be secure. No one loses." "Except honor," Huang said quietly. "Honor," Sun Tzu's smile was sad. "Honor is a story we tell ourselves about why good men should die for bad reasons. I've seen too many honorable commanders march their armies into slaughter because they were too proud to choose the intelligent path over the glorious one. You're better than that, General Huang. You've won 40 battles not because you were the most courageous, but because you were the most careful." He paused. "So be careful now. Accept the gift I'm offering you. Walk away from a war that neither of us needs to fight." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of decision. Huang thought about the soldiers waiting in the Western Pass, about supply lines stretched to breaking, about the invisible enemy that might be massive or might be nothing. He thought about the messenger's words, "Sun Tzu wishes to discuss terms of Chu's surrender." But sitting here now, he realized that surrender had never been on the table. Sun Tzu had been offering mutual withdrawal from the beginning, phrased in a way that would make Huang feel like he was negotiating from weakness, when in fact he was being offered an honorable exit. It was, Huang realized, with a mixture of admiration and frustration, another layer of deception. Even this meeting was psychological warfare, designed to make Huang question everything, while simultaneously offering him exactly what he needed, a way out that would satisfy his superiors without requiring him to test whether Sun Tzu's army was real or illusory. "I accept," Huang said finally. "We will withdraw." Sun Tzu bowed his head in acknowledgement. "A wise decision, General, one that will save thousands of lives." "Tell me one thing," Huang said as they prepared to leave. "Was any of it true? The 30,000 men, the new weapons, the attack through the Western Pass?" Sun Tzu's expression was unreadable. "Does it matter? You made the decision you believed was correct based on the information you had. That's all any commander can do." He turned to leave, then paused. "But I will tell you this, General Huang. The greatest battles are the ones that are never fought. Today, we both won." 3 days later, Chu's army began its withdrawal. They marched back to their territory in good order, suffering no casualties, claiming they had achieved a strategic stalemate. General Huang reported to his king that Wu's defenses were too formidable to breach without unacceptable losses, and continuing the campaign would have overextended Chu's supply lines. The king, satisfied that his army remained intact and his borders secure, declared the campaign a success. Sun Tzu's army watched them go and then also withdrew. When they returned to Wu, the soldiers were celebrated as heroes who had driven off a superior enemy force without losing a single man. The king of Wu, delighted by this bloodless victory, promoted Sun Tzu and sought his counsel on all military matters. In time, Sun Tzu would write down the principles he had demonstrated in this campaign. "The supreme art of war," he would write, "is to subdue the enemy without fighting. He would explain how victory begins long before armies meet in the careful preparation of psychological groundwork, how perception matters more than reality when it comes to determining a commander's decisions, how the space between a man's ears is the real battlefield, and fear and uncertainty are more powerful weapons than any sword. Wei, the young officer who had played the deserter, eventually became one of Sun Tzu's most trusted commanders. Years later, over wine, he asked his master a question that had haunted him since that night. "Master, what would you have done if General Huang had not withdrawn? What if he had called your bluff and attacked?" Sun Tzu considered the question carefully. "Then I would have fought with the 10,000 men I actually had, and we would have made them believe they were facing 30,000 through tactics and deception. I would have made every small victory seem like part of a larger strategy, every retreat seem like a tactical repositioning. I would have fought as if I had already won, until Huang believed it was true." "So you were prepared to fight," Sun Tzu corrected. "I was prepared to win. Fighting is only one method of winning, and rarely the best. The battle I fought against Huang was won when I planted the first seed of doubt in his mind. Everything that followed was allowing that doubt to grow until it bore the fruit I needed." He poured more wine for both of them. "Remember this, Wei. Every battle is won or lost before the first arrow flies. The commander who understands this can win wars without bloodshed, defeat enemies without engaging them, and secure his kingdom without depleting its resources. This is not cowardice or trickery. This is the highest form of strategic thinking." Wei nodded slowly, understanding now what he had been part of. "You taught me that the greatest weapon is not the sword in a soldier's hand, but the thought in a commander's mind." "Yes," Sun Tzu said, "and the greatest victory is the one where both sides walk away believing they won, because no one had to die for anyone to lose." The story of Sun Tzu's bloodless victory over Chu spread throughout the kingdoms of ancient China. Other commanders studied his methods, tried to replicate his success, and mostly failed because they focused on the tactics rather than the principles. They created elaborate deceptions without understanding that deception alone was not enough. You had to understand your enemy so completely that you could predict not just what they would do, but how they would think. Sun Tzu had not merely tricked General Huang, he had presented Huang with a version of reality that aligned perfectly with the general's own experiences, fears, and decision-making patterns. He had made Huang defeat himself by offering him a battle that existed only in imagination, but was more real to Huang than any physical confrontation could have been. This was Sun Tzu's true genius. He understood that war is not about destroying enemies, but about achieving objectives. And the most efficient way to achieve those objectives was to make enemies choose of their own accord the path you wanted them to take. Not through force, but through careful manipulation of information, perception, and psychology. The king of Wu eventually asked Sun Tzu to train his concubines in military discipline, a story that would become famous in its own right. But those who understood Sun Tzu's real methods knew that his greatest lesson could not be taught through such demonstrations. It could only be learned by understanding that every interaction is a battle. Every word is a weapon, and every mind is a battlefield where wars are won or lost long before armies ever meet. Years after the confrontation with Chu, when Sun Tzu was old and his fighting days were behind him, students would come to him seeking the secret to victory. They would ask about formations, about weapons, about terrain and timing. And Sun Tzu would tell them about a young officer named Wei sent into the night with a cargo of lies. He would tell them about a general named Huang who saw an army that didn't exist and heard the thunder of a battle that would never be fought. He would tell them about 10,000 soldiers who returned home as heroes without striking a single blow. This, he would say, is how wars should be won, not through the strength of your army, but through the weakness in your enemy's certainty, not through the sharpness of your weapons, but through the precision of your understanding. The battle you fight in an enemy's mind is the only battle that truly matters.
And his students would nod, understanding the words but not fully grasping the truth behind them, that Sun Tzu had won not because he was cleverer than General Huang, but because he was patient enough to wait for Huang to defeat himself, wise enough to offer him a way to do so while saving face, and compassionate enough to prefer bloodless victory over glorious slaughter. The ghost army that never was had won a battle that was never fought against an enemy who was never really there. And in doing so, Sun Tzu had demonstrated a truth that would echo through military history for thousands of years. The greatest victories are those where your enemy surrenders before they even realize they've lost.
Up next, if you like content like this, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more.